In this session, we are going to discuss about what is thermodynamics and what are the important terminology that is related to thermodynamics and zeroth law of thermodynamics. So here, first of all, let us see what is thermodynamics. See, thermodynamics is an axiomatic science which deals with the conversion of heat into work or power. See, this thermodynamics is derived from two Greek words. One is thermi, the second one is dynamics. Thermi meaning heat and dynamics meaning power or work. Sometimes it's also called force. See, this thermodynamics is an axiomatic science. That means it's based on certain assumptions that we will be learning this subject. For example, sometimes we will be considering an ideal gas, sometimes we will be considering a pure substance. So we will be discussing about what is this ideal gas and what is this pure substances in the further sessions. So before going into this thermodynamics in detail, first of all, let us see what is a system. See, any definite area which is under our consideration or study is called a system. See, this system may be as small as a power plant component like a nozzle, a turbine, like this, or as big as a power plant itself. Or sometimes you can say, you can consider a chemical refinery also as a system. So this system may be as small as these components or as big as this power plant or chemical refinery. So any definite area which is under our consideration or study, we call it as a system, and anything other than the system, we call it as surroundings. So anything other than the system is considered as surroundings. Now, this system and surroundings are separated by a boundary. See, this boundary may be a real boundary or an imaginary boundary. So that's why when we are defining a boundary, it is defined as an actual or hypothetical envelope. So actual or hypothetical envelope which is distinguishing system from its surroundings, we call it as a boundary. So here we can consider this as a boundary of the system. See, why we have considered hypothetical boundary? Let me define you when we consider this hypothetical boundary. So here let us consider there is a very long pipe in which certain amount of fluid is flowing like this. So fluid may be liquid or gas, anything you can consider. Now here I wanted to study the behavior of this fluid at some particular instant. So in order to study the behavior of the fluid at a particular instant, because we can't consider the entire pipe and study the behavior of the fluid. So therefore what we need to do is, we need to consider a small portion where we wanted to study. For that purpose, what we do is, we will consider an imaginary boundary like this. So which is also called a hypothetical boundary, and we will be considering this volume under our control, or we can also call this as control volume, and we will be studying the behavior of the fluid within this control volume. So this control volume is considered by taking an imaginary or hypothetical boundary. So the boundary may be real or imaginary. Now coming to this universe. So let us see what is an universe. See, the system and surroundings together is considered as an universe. So therefore this entire thing can be considered as an universe. So system and surroundings together, we call this as universe here. Now Let us go for the different types of system. So when it comes to different types of system, we come across an open system, closed system and isolated system. So when it comes to open system, both mass and energy transfer takes place across the boundary of the system. So both mass and energy transfer takes place across the boundary of the system in case of open system. For example, you can consider all the engineering systems or engineering devices as examples of open system, because certain mass will enter into the system and leave the system. For example, if you take compressor, air enters into the compressor from the surroundings, gets compressed and leaves the boundary of the system. So you can consider compressor as an open system because mass is entering into the system and leaving the system, and at the same time, so during compression certain amount of heat might be rejected to the surroundings. So therefore you can consider compressor as an open system. Like that, you can consider a turbine as an open system, nozzle as an open system, boiler as an open system. All the engineering devices can be considered as open systems. Whereas when it comes to this closed system, there will be no mass transfer across the boundary of the system, whereas energy transfer takes place across the boundary of the system. For example, you can take piston cylinder arrangement without valves as an example of this closed system. Now, for example, if you take a piston cylinder arrangement like this, there is certain amount of gas that is present inside this piston cylinder arrangement. This gas is considered as our system. Now, the boundaries are these piston walls, these cylinder walls and the piston. Now, mass will not escape, or this gas will not escape, because there will be some piston rings here. Only energy transfer takes place. Suppose if this piston moves inwards, work is done on the system, whereas if this piston moves outwards, work is done by the system. Heat may enter through these boundaries or leave from these boundaries. So therefore, only energy transfer takes place when there are no valves. See, when there are valves, what will happen here is certain gas may enter into the system, gets compressed or gets expanded, then it may leave out of the system. So piston cylinder arrangement with valves is considered as an example of open system, whereas without valves can be considered as a closed system. Or when piston cylinder arrangement which is having valves and the valves are not opened, then also you can consider it as a closed system here. Now coming to this isolated system, so neither mass nor energy transfer takes place across the boundary of the system when it comes to this isolated system. The example of this isolated system is universe. See, usually there is a misconception that isolated system and insulated system both are same. Actually, frankly speaking, both are different. See, isolated system is the system in which neither mass nor energy transfer takes place across the boundary of the system. Whereas when you take insulated system like a thermos flask, so if you take a flask like this, certain amount of fluid is present and this flask is fitted with a lid. Now, see, hot coffee or tea which is poured inside this flask will lose certain temperature after some time. So the reason is this is not perfectly insulated material. So even the insulating material also dissipates certain amount of heat to the surroundings. So that we will be learning in the heat transfer subject, how insulated materials also dissipate certain amount of heat. That depends upon the thermal conductivity of the insulating material that is present. So as energy transfer is taking place or heat transfer is taking place even from this insulated vessel, we can't consider it as an isolated system. So thermos flask or any insulated substances are not considered as isolated systems. So try to remember that clearly. Now, when it comes to this study of thermodynamics, we can study this thermodynamics in two different ways. One is macroscopic point of view and the other one is microscopic point of view of thermodynamics. See, when it comes to this macroscopic point of view of thermodynamics, see, macro means large and we know that micro means small. So when it comes to this macroscopic point of view of thermodynamics, we will be studying about the overall or gross behavior of the system. Whereas in microscopic point of view of thermodynamics, we will be studying each molecule behavior of the system. So, for example, you consider a piston cylinder arrangement like this, in which certain amount of gas is present. So, if we study the behavior of this entire gas, then we call it as macroscopic approach. Whereas, if we study the behavior of each molecule of this system or the gas that is present, then we call that approach as the microscopic approach. Now, this macroscopic point of view of thermodynamics, as we are considering the overall behavior of the system, in order to do analysis on this system, like if we want to calculate heat transfer or work done by this system, then simple mathematical formulae are enough to do the analysis. Whereas, when you take this microscopic point of view of thermodynamics, as we are concentrating on each and every molecule, for each and every molecule behavior, we need to tabulate all the properties, and if we tabulate all the properties, that becomes a statistic. So, as we are tabulating each and every molecule data and we have to do analysis on that particular case, we require complex mathematical formulae for analyzing. So, as we are considering this microscopic approach for each and every molecule and we are tabulating everything, so this type of thermodynamics is also called statistical thermodynamics, whereas macroscopic point of view of thermodynamics, we call it as classical thermodynamics. So, even though when we go by using these both approaches, at the end, finally we are going to get almost the same results. So, microscopic point of view of thermodynamics is majorly studied by the chemical engineering students, and we are going to study majorly on the macroscopic point of view of thermodynamics. Now, let us see what is this thermodynamic equilibrium. So, when we consider this thermodynamic equilibrium, a system is said to be in thermodynamic equilibrium when it is in mechanical, thermal as well as chemical equilibriums. Now, what is this mechanical equilibrium? Suppose if we consider a system, if the net effect of forces or pressures acting on the system is 0, then we consider that system to be in mechanical equilibrium. So, when we consider mechanical equilibrium, the net effect of forces or pressures acting on the system must be equal to 0. Whereas when we consider thermal equilibrium, see, the system is said to be in thermal equilibrium when temperature remains constant. So when the temperature remains constant, then we say that it is in thermal equilibrium. See, a system is said to be in chemical equilibrium when there will be no chemical reaction taking place. So when there is chemical reaction, we know that heat will be generated or heat will be absorbed by that particular substance. As a result of that, there will be variation in different properties because of this heat absorption or rejection. So that's why a system is said to be in chemical equilibrium when there is no chemical reaction taking place. Now, a system is said to be in metastable equilibrium when it is both in mechanical and thermal equilibriums. So when a system is only in mechanical and thermal equilibriums, then we consider that equilibrium as metastable equilibrium. So there may be chemical reaction taking place or might not take place in case of this metastable equilibrium. Now, let us see what is a state and what is property of the system. See, state of the system is nothing but the condition at which the system is existing. State is nothing but the condition of the system. Whereas property defines the state of the system. See, this property defines the state or condition of the system in which it is existing. Now, let us see what are the different types of properties that we come across. See, there are two different types of properties. One is intensive property. The second one is extensive property. See, intensive properties are also called intrinsic properties, whereas extensive properties are also called extrinsic properties. Now, see, intensive or intrinsic properties, these are independent of mass or extent or size of the system. Whereas extensive properties depend on the mass or extent of the system. So to understand about this intensive and intrinsic property, extensive or extrinsic property in detail, let me take a small example. So let us consider there is a vessel like this in which certain amount of gas is present. Now, initially this gas possesses certain pressure P, volume V, temperature T, internal energy or the stored energy which is the function of temperature, and enthalpy H is there. So enthalpy is a function of both pressure and temperature, and it is usually given by the internal energy plus flow work. The product of pressure and volume, we call it as flow work. So we will be discussing about this flow work in detail in the further sessions. Now, let me consider there is I have divided this into two parts by considering a small partition. I have just placed a partition in between without doing any kind of external work onto this particular chamber. So when I have divided this into two portions, then what happens is the pressure in this chamber and in this chamber will remain the same. Temperature in this chamber and in this chamber will remain the same. but there is a variation in the volume in this chamber as well as in this chamber. So let me consider in this chamber it is Vx volume and here Vy is the volume. Now internal energy, as it is a function of temperature, the formula for change in internal energy U2 minus U1 is mCV T2 minus T1. So if you observe carefully, internal energy can also be written as mCVT. That means internal energy is depending upon the mass or size of the system. So therefore there will be variation in the internal energy in this chamber and in this chamber. As there is variation in internal energy, enthalpy H is equal to U plus PV. So internal energy is varying and volume is varying. So there will be variation in the enthalpy in this chamber and in this chamber. So therefore we can easily say from this particular case that intensive or intrinsic properties are simply pressure and temperature, whereas volume, internal energy and enthalpy, as they are depending upon the mass or size of the system, they are considered as extensive properties. Now, any extensive property divided by mass will give an intensive property. For example, volume by mass, we call it as specific volume. So specific volume is an intensive property. Specific enthalpy, small h, which is enthalpy by mass. Similarly, specific internal energy, small u, this is equal to capital U by m. So internal energy by mass will be specific internal energy. So this specific volume will have an unit of meter cube per kg. Specific internal energy will have unit of kilojoule per kg or joule per kg, and specific enthalpy will also have a unit of kilojoule per kg. So this specific volume, specific internal energy and specific enthalpy are intensive properties because they are divided by mass. We are considering per kg mass of the substance. Now let us see process. So when we talk about this process is the cause for change in state of the system. So let us see about this process here. Now let me consider there is a piston cylinder arrangement like this and there is certain amount of gas present. Now let me consider a pressure volume diagram here, PV diagram. So initially this gas is at certain pressure P1 and volume V1, let us say. Now let me consider the initial state is this one. So this point indicates pressure P1 and volume V1. Now if this piston moves outwards like this, then there will be variation in the pressure and at the same time volume. Now see, in order to have the change in state from this position 1 to the second position 2, there should be a process taking place. So here this gas is pushing this piston outwards, causing an expansion. Now as a result of that, there is a variation or change in state from 1 to 2 here. Now let us consider, due to this expansion, the volume increases and the pressure decreases. Now this system is undergoing a change in state from 1 to 2 by following a path. Now Process is the cause for change in the state of the system, and process requires a path to be followed. Now coming to the types of process, here we come across two different processes. One is reversible process. The second one is irreversible process. So when we consider a reversible process, so let me consider a PV diagram like this, pressure volume diagram. Now process 1 to 2 in the previous case has happened like this, 1 to 2. Now if this piston moves inwards like this, then from 2 to 1, if the path followed is also same when the piston is moving from 2 to 1, then we come across such a process as reversible process. So reversible process is a process in which the starting and the end points will be the same and the path followed will also be same. Now when it comes to this irreversible process, so when we consider an irreversible process, here if we consider PV diagram like this, process 1 to 2 we have like this, and 2 to 1 will go like this. So the reason is very simple here. We know that all the processes that are existing in nature are irreversible, because see, when the piston has moved from 1 to 2 like this, expansion of the gases takes place and certain amount of heat will be rejected to the surroundings. Now if the piston is moving back from 2 to 1 position, you can't reach the same initial position because there might be some losses due to friction and some heat loss to the surroundings and some magnetic hysteresis. All these come under picture, and as a result of that, the processes that are going to happen are irreversible here. So all natural processes that are existing in nature are irreversible. Try to remember that condition. Now coming to quasi-static process. So when we consider quasi-static process, quasi means almost, static means reversible. So we consider this quasi-static process as almost reversible process. So in order to achieve this almost reversible process, we need to consider certain assumptions. The first assumption what we need to consider is we need to consider a frictionless piston cylinder arrangement. So there should be a frictionless piston cylinder arrangement like this. And the second thing is we need to use an ideal gas inside this one. So the gas that is being used is ideal gas, and this vessel should be perfectly insulated such that there are no heat losses to the surroundings. So there should be no heat losses to the surroundings here. Now let us consider a PV diagram like this. Initially the gas is at this position 1. Now in order to obtain this quasi-static process or almost reversible process or quasi-equilibrium process, we need to apply infinitesimally small loads. So this infinitesimally small loads of negligible magnitude, if we apply onto this piston, then from 1 to A this piston moves. Then another small load of same magnitude, then the piston moves from A to B. Then another small load, this moves from B to C. Another small load, this moves from C to D. Another small load, this moves from D to E. And finally another small load, let us say it moves to position 2. Now, if I start removing one by one these small loads, then if I remove the topmost load, then the piston moves from 2 to E. Then the second load, if I remove, it moves from E to D, then D to C, then C to B, and B to A, and finally from A to 1 it reaches. So that means when each small load is applied and later on it is removed, the path followed is becoming same. And if you observe carefully, this process is very slow. So under certain assumptions only we will be able to achieve this reversible process. Otherwise, practically speaking, we don't come across any reversible process. Now, let us see what is a point function and what is a path function. See, any quantity that can be measured at any instant of time we call it as a point function. The reason is, here all properties are also considered as point functions. All properties are point functions because they can be measured at any instant of time. For example, you can consider pressure, volume, temperature, internal energy, enthalpy. See, if we consider a piston cylinder arrangement like this, there is certain amount of gas present like this. So this gas has certain pressure P, volume V, temperature T, and as there is some temperature, we will have internal energy for this gas, and as we have temperature, volume, pressure, this gas possesses certain enthalpy. So at any instant of time we can measure all these properties. So that's why we can consider all properties as point functions. But at this instant we don't come across heat or we don't come across work until and unless this piston displaces to certain portion, we get work done. Work done is force multiplied by the displacement or pressure multiplied by the change in volume. So integral f dot ds or integral p dv will give the work done. That means until and unless this piston is moving from one position to another position, we are not going to get work done. And until and unless this piston is moving from one position to another position, there might not be some heat losses to the surroundings or heat gained by the system. So therefore, when the piston is moving from one position to another position, that means a process is taking place and process requires a path to be followed. So therefore, we can consider heat and work as path functions because they require a process to take place. So heat and work are path functions and they require a process to take place. So try to remember this carefully. Now let us see what is a cycle. See, if a system undergoes a series of processes, let us consider a PV diagram like this. The system is undergoing a process from 1 to 2 like this and 2 to 3 like this, and then another process is happening from 3 to 1 like this. Now, see, in this particular case, if you observe, the starting and finishing points are same. So, a system is said to have undergone a cycle when the starting and ending points are same. Even though there might be any number of processes, the process may be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. Any number of processes may take place, but the system should have the same initial and final points. So then only we can say it has undergone a cycle. Now let us see the different sign conventions that we come across for this heat and work. So when it comes to this heat, so we know that heat is a form of energy which is in transit because of temperature difference. Now when we come across this heat, suppose let me consider there is a system like this and there are surroundings like this. Now see, if heat is transferred in this direction, that is from the system to the surroundings, then we call it as heat rejected by the system and it is considered negative. So when heat flows in this direction, the sign convention that we have to consider is minus. Whereas when heat flows from the surroundings to the system, then the sign convention that we need to take is positive. Now here we can write like this: heat supplied to the system or heat absorbed by the system or heat rejected by the surroundings. So these three are considered to be positive. So the direction of heat flow should be from the surroundings to the system. Whereas if you take heat rejected by the system or heat absorbed by surroundings or heat supplied to the surroundings, then this is considered to be negative. So in this case, heat flows from the system to the surroundings outside like this. So these are the sign conventions for heat. Now let us see the sign conventions for work. Now if you consider a system like this and here are the surroundings, now in this case, if the system is doing work on the surroundings, so if the direction of work transfer is like this, then we consider positive. Whereas if the surroundings are doing work on the system, then it is considered negative. So here work done by the system or work done on the surroundings so this is considered as positive, whereas work done on the system or work done by the surroundings so this is taken as negative. So that means if the workflow is from the surroundings towards the system, we need to take negative. From the system to the surroundings, it is considered as positive. So these sign conventions play a very important role in this entire subject. So we should be very much careful with these sign conventions. Now let us come across the zeroth law of thermodynamics. So in order to know about this zeroth law of thermodynamics, first of all, let us consider there are three different objects like this. So let us name these objects as A, B and C. Now, if A is in thermal equilibrium with C and B is also in thermal equilibrium with C, then A and B are said to be in thermal equilibrium. So here try to understand that the zeroth law of thermodynamics is majorly considering thermal equilibrium. That means here the temperature should remain constant. So this zeroth law of thermodynamics gives the property called temperature. See, each law of thermodynamics will give us one particular property, and this zeroth law of thermodynamics is giving us temperature here. Now, as we are knowing about this temperature, so temperature we know it is the measure for hotness or coldness of a system. So we need to know certain instruments which are going to measure this temperature. So usually we come across liquid in glass thermometers. So this liquid in glass thermometers, usually what we see are the mercury thermometers. Sometimes there will be alcohol thermometers also, which are used to measure lower temperatures. See, temperature is an indirect measurement. We can't directly measure what is the temperature of that particular substance. So for that we will be using certain device. So when it comes to this liquid in glass thermometer, based on the height of the liquid column, we are going to measure the temperature. So when we take our ordinary thermometer, with the rise in the mercury level inside the thermometer, we are going to measure the temperature of our human body or certain substance which we wanted to measure the temperature. So based on this height of the liquid column, there might be some calibration like this. 1 centimeter rise is equal to some 3 degrees centigrade rise in the temperature. Like this, there will be some calibration. Based on this calibration, we are going to measure the temperature. Now, coming to the second one, if we want to measure very high temperatures, then we go for gas thermometers. For example, we wanted to measure the temperature of molten steel. See, molten steel temperature will be very high, and a normal thermometer, steel itself has melted at that particular temperature. If we are going to use a liquid in glass thermometer, it is not possible to measure the temperature. Then we go for these gas thermometers. So there will be two different types of gas thermometers. One is constant volume gas thermometer. Second one is constant pressure gas thermometer. So when you take this constant volume gas thermometer, see, as the name indicates, volume is kept constant, and with the rise in pressure, we are going to measure the temperature. We know that when volume is kept constant, pressure is directly proportional to temperature. So with the increase in pressure, there might be increase in the temperature or vice versa. Then when it comes to this constant pressure gas thermometer, the thermometric property by which we are going to measure temperature is volume. So at P equal to constant, we know that volume is directly proportional to temperature. Then there will be some other types of thermometers called electrical resistance thermometers. So in this electrical resistance thermometer, based on the resistance offered, we are going to measure the temperature. Then, in order to measure temperature difference between a hot body and cold body, we come across devices called thermocouple. So this thermocouple, based on the EMF induced between these two, we are going to measure the temperature. Then if we want to measure very high temperatures, then we go for devices called pyrometers. So these pyrometers are used to measure very high temperatures, and based on the intensity of radiation, we are going to measure the temperature in case of these pyrometers. So these are the different temperature measuring instruments. Now let us see the different scales of temperature. See, before 1854, there used to be two different scales. One is Celsius or centigrade scale. The second one is Fahrenheit scale. Fahrenheit scale. Now this is taken as degree centigrade, this is degree F here. Now after 1854, there is one scale that we are using predominantly, that is Kelvin scale. So before 1854, we have used these two scales, and we need to get a comparison between these two scales. For that particular purpose, we will be considering the melting point and boiling point of water. So boiling point and melting point of water at atmospheric pressure. Here try to remember, we are considering at atmospheric pressure. So at atmospheric pressure, the boiling point is 100 degrees centigrade and melting point is 0 degrees centigrade. Whereas in the Fahrenheit scale, the melting point is 32 degrees Fahrenheit and this one is 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Now at some C degrees centigrade, I wanted to know it in terms of Fahrenheit F. So for that purpose, we need to go for linear interpolation. So the linear interpolation goes like this: C minus 0 by 100 minus 0 is equal to, corresponding to C, we have F here. So F minus, corresponding to 0, this is 32 degrees Fahrenheit, by corresponding to 100, 212 degrees Fahrenheit minus 32. So C by 100 is equal to F minus 32 by 180, and we can write this as C by 5 is equal to F minus 32 by 9. So this is the relation between centigrade scale and Fahrenheit scale. So 25s and 29s. See, in the GATE examination, this centigrade and Fahrenheit relation will not be given. So he will be giving, instead of this Fahrenheit scale, there is some X scale which is having a boiling point of 180 and melting point of 20 degrees. So we need to determine some X value at some particular degree centigrade. Then what we need to do is, we will be simply using the formula like this: C minus 0 by 100 minus 0 is equal to X minus 20 by 180 minus 20. So C by 100 is equal to X minus 20 by 160, 25s and 28s. So the relation becomes C by 5 is equal to X minus 20 by 8. So like this, some relations might be given here. Now, after 1854, we have only one particular scale, that is Kelvin scale. See, 0 degrees centigrade is equal to 273.16 Kelvin. We have approximated this to 273 Kelvin, and in the normal use we will be seeing this 273 Kelvin. Now let us see what is this ideal gas equation. See, usually we will be writing two different equations like this. One is PV is equal to nRT and the other equation is PV is equal to mRT. See, P is pressure, V is volume, T is temperature, N is the number of moles here. Here P is pressure, V is volume, M is the mass of the gas and T is the temperature. See, when we are considering number of moles, then the gas constant that we are using here, this is universal gas constant. Whereas when we take PV equal to mRT relation, this R that we are using here is the characteristic gas constant. So there is a difference between universal gas constant and characteristic gas constant. So if we consider universal gas constant by molecular weight of that particular gas, that gives us the characteristic gas constant. So universal gas constant by molecular weight M of the particular gas will give us the characteristic gas constant. And the value of universal gas constant is always same, and that is 8.314 kilojoule per kilomole Kelvin or 8.314 joule per mole Kelvin. Whereas characteristic gas constant varies with respect to gas, because for each gas there will be different molecular weight. So that is the reason this characteristic gas constant varies with respect to gas. Now suppose if you consider air, air has molecular weight M is equal to 28.97. So the characteristic gas constant of air will be 8.314 divided by 28.97. This will be approximately equal to 0.287 kilojoule per kg Kelvin. Whereas if you take carbon dioxide, then characteristic gas constant of carbon dioxide will be different. It will be 8.314 by 44 carbon dioxide molecular weight. So this will be 0.189 kilojoule per kg Kelvin approximately. So for each gas, the gas constant will be different. Characteristic gas constant, or sometimes it is called gas constant only. So try to remember the relation between the characteristic gas constant and universal gas constant. Now let us go for the relation between specific heats. This is also very much important here. So we usually come across two specific heats. One is specific heat at constant pressure, the other one is specific heat at constant volume. See, what is specific heat? First of all, we need to know. See, the amount of heat required to rise the temperature of a particular substance by 1 degree centigrade, we call it as specific heat. And when we consider it by taking pressure constant, we call it as specific heat at constant pressure. When we consider by taking volume constant, we can consider it as specific heat at constant volume. See, for liquids and solids, the specific heat at constant pressure and constant volume will be almost same for liquids and solids. Whereas for gases, there is a significant variation in specific heat at constant pressure and specific heat at constant volume. So the relation between these specific heats, the difference between the specific heat at constant pressure and specific heat at constant volume is called characteristic gas constant. So Cp minus Cv is equal to R, which is the characteristic gas constant here. Suppose if you take molar specific heats, that means per mole, if you consider the specific heat, then the difference between molar specific heats will be equal to the universal gas constant. So molar specific heat at constant pressure minus molar specific heat at constant volume will be equal to universal gas constant. This is also a very important relation which we need to remember here. Then the ratio of these specific heats, Cp by Cv, we call it as gamma, which is also called adiabatic index or ratio of specific heats. Now, if you observe this carefully, Cp will be equal to gamma Cv, and if I substitute this gamma Cv in this expression, gamma Cv minus Cv is equal to R, Cv into gamma minus 1 is equal to R, and Cv is equal to R by gamma minus 1. So this is one important relation, and as Cp is equal to gamma Cv, from this we can write Cp is equal to gamma R by gamma minus 1. So this is specific heat at constant pressure. So this is how we will get the relation between specific heats, the adiabatic index and the characteristic gas constant. See, in this entire subject, these equations play a predominant role. So try to remember carefully. Now, the most important thing here that we are going to learn is about the construction of PV diagram. So when we come across this construction of PV diagram, here try to remember this carefully. All the ideal gases obey a law called PV power n is equal to constant. So PV power n is equal to constant. Now this value of n, the index, may vary from 0 to infinity. If we take n is equal to 0, then what happens is PV power 0 is equal to constant, and from this V power 0 is 1, so pressure remains constant. So when pressure is remaining constant, we will get a horizontal line like this. So we will get a horizontal line when n is equal to 0 like this. Then when n is equal to infinity, when n is equal to infinity, PV power infinity equal to constant. We can write this as P1 V1 power infinity is equal to P2 V2 power infinity, and we can write this as P1 power 1 by infinity into V1 is equal to P2 power 1 by infinity into V2. So 1 by infinity is 0. So therefore P1 power 0 is nothing but 1. So here this becomes V1 is equal to V2, or volume is equal to constant. When n is equal to infinity, the second case, volume is remaining constant. So therefore when volume is kept constant, we will get a vertical line like this. So this curve is n is equal to infinity curve, n is equal to infinity, and here this one is n is equal to 0. Now when n is equal to 1, here PV is equal to constant, that means pressure is inversely proportional to volume. So when pressure is inversely proportional to volume, we can consider it by considering a curve like this. N is equal to 1, this is a curve like this. Then suppose if n is equal to gamma for air, n is equal to gamma for air, which is equal to 1.4 at atmospheric pressure, then 1.4 lies in between 1 and infinity. So therefore we can draw the curve like this. n is equal to gamma for air, which is equal to 1.4. Now, here, if I consider this as the starting point, and if I draw towards this direction, the second process 1 to 2 is going in this particular direction. So these curves are called compression curves. So if we go in this direction, this becomes compression. Whereas if we consider this as starting point and the second point is obtained at these particular places, then in this direction we call these curves as expansion curves. So this is how we will construct a PV diagram based on the condition PV power n is equal to constant. Depending upon the variation of n, the graph comes like this. So this is how we construct a PV diagram. Now let us see the construction of TS diagram. See, for TS diagram, we don't have an index like this, but we know that when temperature is constant, we will get a horizontal line. This is when temperature is constant. When entropy is constant, we will get a vertical line like this. When entropy is constant, we will get a vertical line like this. Now, in order to construct constant pressure as well as constant volume line in the TS diagram, we need to assume one particular thing, that is, we need to consider for both the processes heat transferred is same. Heat transferred during constant pressure process is equal to heat transferred during constant volume process. See, during constant pressure process, the formula for heat transferred is mCp delta T. This is at constant pressure. This is equal to, during constant volume, the formula for heat transfer is mCv delta T. This is at constant volume we are considering. Now, if we consider the mass to be same for both the cases, then mass gets cancelled. And we know that for gases, Cp is always greater than Cv. So Cp is always greater than Cv, and the relation between Cp minus Cv is R. So as Cp is greater than Cv, in order to balance this equation, heat transferred during constant pressure process and heat transferred during constant volume process, if these two must be equal, then the change in temperature during constant pressure process must be less than the change in temperature during constant volume process. So this clearly indicates that if we consider constant volume process, its slope will be greater. So this is constant volume process, and when we consider constant pressure process, it will be like this. So pressure is constant here. And this is volume is constant. The reason is very simple here. The change in temperature delta T during constant volume process must be more than the change in temperature during constant pressure process. So in order to get this equation, we need to have, or we need to draw the slopes like this. So we will be learning further about this heat transfer during constant pressure process formula and constant volume process formula in the further sessions. So here we need to know that the TS diagram comes in the first and third quadrants, whereas the PV diagram comes in the second and fourth quadrants when n is considered positive. Now, if we go in this particular direction, suppose let us consider the starting point here. If we go in this particular direction, this is heat addition, whereas if we go from the starting points in this direction, then these curves are heat rejection curves. So during heat rejection, the temperature decreases and at the same time entropy also decreases. Whereas during heat addition, there might be an increase in the temperature as well as entropy here. So we need to know about what is this entropy. See, entropy, in order to understand it better, let us consider a vessel like this in which certain amount of gas is present. Now, over this vessel, I am placing a lid and I started heating this vessel by using some burner. See, when I started heating this vessel by using some burner, what happens is, see, these molecules will try to diffuse and move randomly because of the heat absorption from here, and due to this random movement of the molecules, this will go and diffuse or displace this lid upwards. Now, this phenomena happens in any of the cases. So here, entropy is defined as the quantity of heat which is the cause for conversion of heat into work. So entropy is the randomness or disorderness of the molecules, which is because of the absorption of this heat, and as a result of that, this heat is getting converted to work due to this random motion of the molecules. So entropy is a quantity of heat which is the cause for conversion of heat into work. As we have learnt about the definition of thermodynamics, so thermodynamics deals with the conversion of heat into work. So how this heat is getting converted to work, that depends upon this phenomena of entropy. And this concept of entropy is obtained from the second law of thermodynamics. In the further sessions, we are going to learn about this entropy in detail.